the reason why you're going to do a lot of this work up front is because you want them to really feel that they've made the right choice, and you want to build that authority and that reputation early, because you don't get a second chance to make a good impression. You make it good in the first couple weeks, and it will kind of follow you throughout the time you spend there. Let's talk about learning the product. So the first thing you want to do when you get your job as a business analyst, your first job within the first couple of days, is learning the product. How do you do this? And this is going to shock you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The first thing is you have to use the product, right? So if it's a software product, let's say you're working for Salesforce, you're a BA hired for Salesforce, and you know something about Salesforce, but now that you're hired and you're working on, let's say, Einstein, or you're working on some AI to make Salesforce more smart. Well, you have to get in there and use it. So make sure you get your access, ask for, some people I know, they're working on a project and it's weeks before they even ask for access. They're just doing everything else. They're reading onboarding programs. They're doing what they're being told to do. But again, you onboard yourself. Regardless of what the onboarding program is, you can follow it, you can do it. But at some point, you need to find a way to get this in for yourself, because when that onboarding program is done, you have to start delivering. And you're not going to have the time now to go learn the things that you should have learned, because sometimes onboarding does teach you, but sometimes it doesn't. So you're not going to depend on that, right? So learn the product. You're going to use it, get access to it, get in there. Even if you don't know what it is, read the help, read the manual. I'll tell you another example. So I got hired in this space that I never worked in before. So it was customer support software, and they were helping large companies to identify risks with their customers. Like it's a B2B, right? So they would identify risk with the customers, they identify if the customer is healthy or not. They have graphs for that. They have indicators for that. They have NPS scores to indicate that. They would also help to try to preempt churn. It was a very good data analytical style software, but I just never worked in like customer support systems before. So it was kind of a different thing. I have a lot of banking experience, but I didn't have a lot of customer support experience in terms of how to use the tool. And I've never really worked in customer support much myself either. So like I didn't have domain knowledge either. So I'm working in this thing. And the first time I go to this is my first day. They have a little bit of onboarding. It wasn't much. And I was partnering with another BA that was there before me. And I went to the meetings. I asked her to invite me to, by the way, that's the other thing too. You don't know what you don't know, but volunteer to be in some of the meetings. If you hear somebody's having a meeting where they're talking about requirements, oh, can you add me? Oh, can you help me join that meeting? I would love to join. That's okay. Just want to listen in. When you're new, they'll give you that grace because they know you have to learn. So build the muscle of asking to be a part of these meetings so you can at least listen. Even if you don't understand it, you listen, because the jargons are going to start coming out that are company-specific jargons, and you don't know what they mean at first, but after hearing them, now you'll know what to go look for, right? So in this meeting, I heard them using a lot of terms and stuff, and I was like, it's like they were speaking Japanese. I didn't understand a thing. So I asked her, I didn't ask her to tell me what all of these things mean, which you can do also. But I said to her, where would I find the help or the manual documentation for this system? And she shared it with me. And I went in there, and best believe that I read the manual for the system cover to cover. I normally give myself 2 weeks when I'm at a new job to really get up to speed with the product, with the process, and the people, at least. You won't know everything. Don't give yourself an overarching expectation. Understand that the people that you're working with have been there longer than you. You just arrived. So if they've been there for 15 years, you're not going to know as much as they know within the first couple of weeks, right? So you kind of have to accept that. But as much as you can do on your own, do that. Some people are just so happy they get the job. They go, they clock in, they clock out, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to get paid. I'm great. The BA role, you cannot hide. There's nobody to do it for you, and you're owning the requirements. So it's a lot of responsibility. So you'll aid yourself later if you do the bigger work earlier, because in the earlier parts, they know you're new. They'll give you more grace. They don't expect to give you a big project day one, right? Because you have to, everybody knows you have to learn the system and the process and the company, all that stuff. So while they're giving you that grace and they haven't dumped a big, heavy project on you yet, use that time to learn, so that within a month, when they start assigning you to a project and they start asking you for deadlines and, business requirements document and user stories and all this stuff that you need to deliver, you don't feel as much overwhelmed because you weren't cruising in the beginning. You just jump right in, and now you're understanding what they're talking about in the meetings, because now the jargon start to make sense, because some of those jargons are going to be in the manual and documentation that you've read. So become a sponge. It's not cruise time. You'll cruise later when you've done the work, and hopefully you get a chance to take a breath, right? Take a breather. Some jobs, it just keeps going on and on and on, and you feel like you're overwhelmed. And I would hope that you don't land in those sweatshop kind of jobs. But a lot of the jobs, once you've delivered your requirements, you have a little bit of a respite. You have a little bit of a break, and then you can get ready for the next set, right? And in between that, you take your vacation, take a PTO if you feel stressed, or you take, any holidays, you take it, and that's it. But the reason why you're going to do a lot of this work up front is because you want them to really feel that they've made the right choice, and you want to build that authority and that reputation early, because you don't get a second chance to make a good impression. You make it good in the first couple weeks, and it will kind of follow you throughout the time you spend there, right? So I encourage you to do that. This video is brought to you by the Back Office Club. So go to backofficeclub.org to learn more about the program I have to help you to grow as a business analyst. So you work on projects, real projects with real complexities from the real world. So you really can practice how to be a BA. If you have a job or you're in the job market, this will be great for you. You don't have to have experience to join. You'll be surrounded by like-minded individuals who are also trying to start their career. You have a direct access to ask a question, get the questions answered. This is not like an online course that you're just watching videos, and you have a question, is like, where do I go to get an answer, right? You always have the community. You have myself. You practice with the real tools that we use in the field, such as Jira, DevOps. You learn how to work with designs. You learn how to lead. You learn how to have refinement sessions. You learn how to run these stand-ups if you're in agile. So you get a lot of exposure. And we have touch points every single week. So you're meeting with me, you're talking with me, you're talking with the team, you're getting the support to grow your career. So I would encourage you to check out the Back Office Club at backofficeclub.org, or the link below the description of this video. Watch this video, and then when you're done, go check out the Back Office Club, because there'll be a lot of good stuff over there to help you cement yourself as an expert business analyst. All right, now go watch the rest of the video. See you over there. Read reviews, see what other people are saying about the products or the service or the company. See where we're weak, and just file that away in your brain, because maybe you can't change things right away. You're new. Nobody's going to listen to you right now. You're not going to be able to come in and just start changing things. You could make suggestions here and there. And if you have systems that you had at your previous job that worked and they're open to your suggestion, then you can suggest it. But they're not necessarily going to change the way they've been working because you came along, right? You have to earn their respect, and over time you can change them, but you won't be able to change them like in the short term, unless you're hired in a leadership position, and that's a part of your job to make the process better, and they give you that authority. But if you're just coming in, you're probably not going to make that big of a change. But reading the manual, using the product, getting a demo for things that you don't have access to, ask somebody to show it to you, to demo it to you, take notes. I like to have my little writing pad because I write things down with pen and paper. I find that I remember a lot that way. And that's what I do, right? So you got to do a lot of that in the first couple of days. We're over time. And I haven't gone through the rest yet. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to run through these two. So people, obviously you have to build relationships. You have to let people know who you are. Some of the shortcuts that you can use to build good relationship is just asking for introductions, right? So a lot of times we get hired, your manager is busy, they're in the middle of a project, they're running around trying to do stuff. They can actually forget about you because they don't really have you as a necessity yet. because you just got hired, right? So they could be already in the inertia. They're in the work of doing whatever they're normally doing, and they haven't thought yet about where they're going to put you, what they're going to give you responsibility for. So you could just be there, and you could be forgotten for a week or so, depending on how busy the place is. So you need to kind of let yourself be seen, right? So ask for them for them to introduce you. Like you say, hey, I haven't met the project manager yet. I haven't met the rest of the coworkers in the team, especially if you're virtual. Who are the people that I need to be talking to? Get their names. And when you get their names, set a little calendar meeting on their calendar. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. 30 minutes too. Don't go over 30 minutes, but it's just an introduction, a chance for you to meet with them to say, hey, my name is Bella. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to be working as a business analyst. I know you're working in operations, and they told me that you'd be a great resource to talk about this project. So just wanted to give you a few minutes to find out what your day-to-day looks like. Anything you think would be helpful for us to work together well, like just a chit chat. This is not really a requirement session. It's just for me to get more familiar with working with you and just try to introduce myself. But simple, right? But now they get to know your name. They get to know what your role is. They get to know what you're working on. They get to see your face. So go on camera if you're virtual, and if you're physically in the office, obviously you're gonna go sit with them in person. But you now start to build this relationship with people that would help you to also benefit, right? Set up meetings, right? So, and then just get a gist of their roles. You won't know everything about them in just 15 or 20 minutes, but it's great introduction, a great way for them to know there's somebody new on the team, and for them to get a sense of your personality as well. The last thing I want to talk about is the processes. And again, I put process, but I'm gonna change this to mean way of working, because process could be maybe the thing that you want to improve. They may have hired you to make the process better. And as note about that, sometimes when you get hired within the first couple of weeks, you are sometimes assigned to somebody to help you to understand the company, the products, what we do. And so they'll show you around and they'll show you how they do things. But I want you to be cautious that sometimes what they're showing you is how they have been doing things. And sometimes you're hired to not do the same thing. So in other words, try to avoid adapting bad habits. Like, you don't want to learn the bad things and just do what you've been told because that's what everybody's been doing. As a BA, you're going to be the one to look at the process to say, well, is this the right process? Are we being efficient? Even within how you work as BAs. So when you go to these sessions and you meet with these people, you want to absorb, again, be a sponge. I want to know what you're doing right now. How does it currently work? But then in the back of your brain, wherever you identify inefficiency, you're going to say, well, that's inefficient. That's not the best thing. You keep it to yourself at first. You make a note of it. Because at some point, you're going to make suggestions as to how to improve it. But the minute they're telling you, you could ask a question, yes or no, or try to get clarification. But it's not the place to, like, champion the change, right? You just want to understand what they do, the current as it state, and then you can start looking at ways that you would improve this, because maybe they hired you, and sometimes they tell you, sometimes they don't, because they want to change. I've been hired before, and the person I was working with was telling me how they wrote user stories, and I said, let me see some of the examples. And when they opened up the user story, I was like, my jaws almost dropped to the ground. Like, what am I looking at right now? Right? It was a mess. It was a complete mess. It was this paragraph, and I felt like I was reading a storybook, and I had no clue what she's actually asking them to build. But I can't say that then. I just say, okay. And then I look at story after story after story after story. And when you look at the comments on this story, this was in Jira, the comments were so long because everybody was confused and they were trying to drill down and try to get some sense of what are we supposed to be doing here. And she would respond to the comments, and then we'd go to sprint planning, and then I would see the pattern. So she'd show me these are stories, and I would observe, and I'd go to the stand-up and I'd see the kind of questions, and I would go to the sprint planning. The first sprint planning, I was amazed. There were so many questions about even one story. We couldn't get through the whole backlog of what we had planned for the sprint. There were so many questions, and that's a telltale sign that your requirements are not clear. I know this because I'm formally trained as a BA. The person I was working with was not formally trained as a BA, so they were just doing whatever they could. There's no shade to them. They just never had the training. So with something like that, you don't come in and just start saying, oh, this is a better way to do it. And, nobody likes that. So what you do is you kind of take a note of where it's inefficient, because there's no reason why all the developers are confused all the time. It's just not, this is not good. And so I would meet with each person individually, and I would say, hey, I'm the new BA, I'm working on this project, want to see if there's any way I could work well with you, anything that you'd like to, if I could improve on, what would it be? And almost unanimously everybody would tell me, the user stories. It's so confusing. I don't know what I'm building. I have spent so much time in the sprint just trying to clarify what do you want me to deliver, that I waste half the sprint doing that. So it was frustrating, but they didn't want to do that part. They want to write code. Right? So they have to rely on somebody else to just do the user story part, do the elicitation part. So those are some of the things you could uncover when you get your first job, that I'm saying, don't, that person would teach you that this is what a user story looks like, or this is how we do the process, or this is how we have long conversations and we go to sprint planning and waste a bunch of time, and nobody realizes it could be done better. So you don't really want to learn the bad behavior. You want to see what they're doing. And hopefully by being a member of the back office club, you start to know what it should look like, how it should go. And then you can start making suggestions as to how to improve. And you do that over time. So what I did was, when it was time for me to write my user story, I just wrote it the way it's supposed to be written. I didn't have to go preach to nobody. I just wrote it very clearly, exactly how it needs to be written. And when we went to sprint planning and they were looking at my story, oh, we estimated that thing in no time. Right? And the developers were like, oh, I like this format. I like this format. We should do all the stories like this. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you do. In the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, I bet you do. So sometimes you can effect change without trying to like preach about it, right? So you're new. Nobody really is going to listen to you too much. So you kind of have to do whatever is within your control to make sure your quality of work that you do, that's assigned to you, is high quality. And that's how you kind of win them over. So having understanding of the way of working is great, but it doesn't mean that everything you're going to learn is going to be perfect, right? There could be inefficiencies, and maybe you can suggest how to make that better as you go along. If there's any templates or documentation you had from another project or another company and something that makes sense could apply, and if they are willing to hear it, because it's very difficult to influence upward, if they're willing to hear it and if something that you can implement in your own work, then do that, right? And make it available for everybody else. So find ways that you can be helpful. It's a great way to build rapport and to build to have a good impression in the first 60 days. Like if you just join and you don't know the product, you don't know the company, you don't know the project, you're still finding your way around, that's okay. You join the meetings, maybe the person who's presenting is also presenting, and they're also taking notes. And you could say, it's okay, I'll take the notes for you. For example, be helpful. Like if you can take the meeting notes, do that if you feel comfortable. If there's anything you can volunteer to do, then do that. Like it could be that you need expert knowledge in the company and the product and the services, and you don't have that yet. But there are other things you could do, like you could help with, I don't know, again, the notes. If there's anything that you can document that's generic, that you could just do that. Wherever you can, be helpful, do that. Because set up a meeting, even if you don't know what the content of the meeting is about, or you don't really want to moderate the meeting, but, oh, we need to have a meeting about this. You're like, oh, you want me to set that up for you? I could do that. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. It doesn't cost you anything, but jumping around and finding wherever there's help needed and being willing to volunteer, that helps you to get the brand of being a very helpful, very thoughtful, very good person, and they know that you're still new and you're still learning, so there's some things they wouldn't expect from you. But whatever you can do, doing it is really very, very helpful and helps to set the tone for the rest of your time with them. So that's what I have for you guys today about how to just start. And we're going to have another session tomorrow. We're going to dive deeper into exactly how do you work on your first project. Who do you talk to? What kinds of questions should you be asking? How do you write your first set of documentation? What documentation makes sense at what stage of the project? All of these more intricate things we're going to get into in our session tomorrow. But this was just like an overview, an introduction, if you will, of how do you add value very quickly, and what are the things you can do to onboard yourself, and how do you act? How do you prepare for the success that you're going to have when you get your first project?
Thank you so much. So I should just think of this. Just get a acronym or something. PPP, right? To
Yeah, I mean,
remember
you can say that.
product, people,
Product
process.
people and processes. That's right. Triple
Yeah.
P.
Thank you.
There are other people who have different schools of thought, but I've just found that once you can master these
Mm-hmm.
things quickly, you start adding value because once, especially when you focus on the product, and now you know what the acronyms mean that they're talking about. Now you understand some of the business rules. So when they're having discussion, you can add value. One of the things I found that new BAs sometimes fail in is that, and I've had consultations with people who have told me this exact thing, is that they don't like to ask questions to feel like they're asking a silly question. They go to the meetings and they zip zip. They never ask a
Mm-hmm.
question ever.
I do
So
that.
it's not good. I'll tell you. No, it's bad to ask a silly question. I get that. And if the question is not necessary, you shouldn't say anything. But I would assume that yes, in the first couple of meetings you don't say anything because you're learning. You're there to absorb, to understand. But if
Yeah.
you don't couple that with learning the product and understanding the people in the process, so that you can have a question, because there's going to be things that they're talking about that you as a BA should be picking up on. For example, I just got transferred to this new project. I was working on a feature, a different feature before. Now I'm working on a more intricate feature. This I'm working on payments, and I have not been in the conversations that they've been having, and they're midway in the project.
Okay.
So when I get in, nobody has time to go teach me everything they've already done. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have time to go backward just for my benefit. So when you join in, the momentum is already happening. They're already having their stand up. They're already having their refinement. They're already discussing things. They're in the middle of it. They're not going to stop just to explain to you every single thing they've done up to that point. You have to onboard yourself. But they expect at some point that you're going to deliver things. So even though I've not been working on this thing and this is my first week with them, best believe it, I need to deliver some requirements by next week. And I'm okay with that because this is what I do. But the way I can get up to speed faster is I already know the gist of the product, to be honest with you. I've been working with the product for a while. Every time you leave it for even like 6 months, new updates are sent out and you don't know what those new updates are. So now you have to go read the release notes to see what did we do in the last 6 months when I wasn't looking at you. Right? So it's the job I have, it's constantly changing. So you can't be an expert for too long because as soon as you turn your back on it, somebody else is building out a whole bunch of stuff, and then you look back and you're like, oh, and now I don't know what you've done. So I have to get up to speed. But on top of that, the stand-ups are happening, the refinements are happening, the sprint planning is happening, and as I'm in the meetings and I'm listening, now I hear, for example, today I heard, for example, if you do a transfer, and this is just a very intricate banking example, if you do an international transfer, this is where you're transferring between different currencies, and depending on the time of day of the transfer, it could get rejected because of the business rule that the bank has. So the bank said your
Mm.
bank hours is between X and YZ time. If you do the transfer outside of this time, it's going to be rejected. You have to do it again. I didn't know that. I don't
No.
think it's true.
Does the customer can so the customer is restricted from
From
transferring why?
Yeah, don't ask me. That's one of their rules. Now
Oh,
they have
international transfer, right? You said.
international wire transfers. So they have other rules. For example, if you over a certain time, then they will do it, but it'll be dated for the next day, right? So they have, depending on the type of transaction, it could either be rejected or it will be they'll give you a warning to say, if you
Mhm.
send this transfer after, let's say the banking hours is 5 p.m.,
Yeah.
5 p.m. it's going to be dated for the next day and blah, 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 right? So they tell the customer some of this stuff. But for the one that they were going to reject, which as a BA, now that's going to perk you up, like reject. You're going to reject somebody's transfer? Like
Mm.
now I'm interested. So like if you're going to reject it, where's the message that we're going to send? And while they were talking, I didn't hear that come on. This is a big meeting. So I have to put my hand up and say, oh, I'm sorry. But let's go back to that. Where do we find the list of hours? Okay, we have the hours over here. Okay, how is that tied to this transaction, and how does the customer know before he makes this transaction that this is going to be the effect if it's over this time? And then it sparked a whole different conversation because we're building this thing out, right? But that's the kind of thing that they expect a BA to pick up on. If you're not looking into the product and you're not following what the product is supposed to be doing, and let's say you're a shy person, you're just going to let them continue the conversation. Sometimes nobody else is thinking the way you are thinking.
Okay.
Sometimes in the meeting, you might have even other BAs, but they're focused on other things. You have software architects sometimes, you have QAs, you have Scrum Masters. Everybody's like in their own world sometimes. Sometimes it's just you have to be the advocate for the customer. But because you're afraid to ask a question, because you're scared to ask a question, even if the question is silly, and it bugs me if I don't ask it. If I feel like, well, maybe I should know this, I start by saying, this is a silly question. I'm sorry if it's silly, but I just need to clarify what XYZ. Right? And they go, no, this is a good question. I'm glad that you mentioned it. Or they'll say, oh, yeah, this is what it is. Blah, blah, blah. Like, for example, another example. While they're discussing about this type of payment, they mentioned that if the account that you're choosing from to move the money from is eligible, then some other thing happened. And then later on in the conversation, they said, well, if the account is compatible, then something has happened. So, my brain is like, stop. What is this eligibility versus compatibility?
Mm-hmm.
Right? No, you just have to be paying attention, and nobody else asked the question. Everybody else is just I don't know, maybe they're paying attention, I don't know. But it struck me as odd that they said compatible in one part and the next side they're saying eligible. So I have to ask, did you mean it that way? Was it just a way of saying? And she said, no. For us, eligible means that it's the same type of account, like savings to savings or savings and checking. It's an account type that we allow transfers. For example, you can't transfer from a credit card to a savings account, for example, right? So that's not
okay.
But compatible for them means it's the currency. So you probably can have USD to Canadian or USD to Australian or Euro or whatever. But there are some currencies that they don't do. So that's compatible. I didn't know that. Those are things that can easily fly over your head, right? So these are the things that I'm just calling it out to say. These are some of the things that as a BA, you have to call these things out. You have to ask questions. So the number one thing I find that BAs do is that they don't ask enough questions and they're scared to ask questions when they're new. I'm not saying you go out there and ask a bunch of silly questions and get the reputation silly and disruptive. But there are times that if you spend the time learning the product and trying to understand as much as you can about the domain that you're working in, after a while, some of these questions will come up. Now, you should be asking questions about things that you should know, like, how do you write a BRD? That's not a good question.
Of course not.
Where do we put the description in Jira? That's not a good question, right? You should be dominant in the things that relate to BA. But whenever it comes to business rules, requirements, exact details about projects, those are things that you should be asking because sometimes nobody else is asking them.
So when you talk about the product, like in this case, first thing I want to try to understand, like you're like, it's your company, right, that developed the product, right? So you're going to now build it or customize it to the client's specification.
Rules,
Okay. So the those you're talking about, the stakeholders are actually the clients, right? So you know the product more than, even though the BA just joined, but in this kind of situation, the BA still would know the product more than.
Correct.
In
my situation, I am the expert in the product, but they're the expert in how their bank works and their banking rules.
They know their banking rules, their processes,
the processes and what is allowed, what's not allowed. I know how the product can be configured to fit those.
Okay, so you're saying like you had to join in as a new BA, you had to learn your company's product quickly,
Correct.
right? Okay,
So now
okay.
I have to go study what have we changed since I last looked at this product. What was in
And
the
when you last looked at it, okay, okay,
yeah.
okay,
And
okay.
going back to the example of not asking questions, one of the ladies that reached out to me one time, she had been employed for this new job for 2 months, and she said to me, "I think they're going to fire me." And I was like, "Why did you say that?" She said, "Because now that I've been there for 2 months, they want me to deliver this and this, and I have no clue." And I got sat down by my manager, and she's like, "Well, we hired you for you to help us with these requirements, and we haven't seen any output. And as a matter of fact, we haven't seen anything that you've produced so far. And, I don't even hear you asking any questions." So they
Mhm.
were not happy with the silence that she gave. So this is why I said to be helpful, right? Because even if you're not able to learn the product to the level where you can like challenge whatever they're doing or add value there, just doing something sometimes helps to build the perception that you're still in the process of learning things. And communicate to your leader. Like, I don't know if every company have these one-on-ones, but if you don't have it, you should try to have it. It's better for you to have one-on-ones than for the manager, to be honest with you, because you get a chance, especially when you're new, to help them to learn who you are,
Yeah,
in a big group, right? In a big group, you get lost in the group. But when you can have one-on-ones, if you don't have that on your calendar, ask to put it on your calendar and meet with them every week or every 2 weeks, because you need them to know what you're working on, what you're doing, how you're faring, so they can advocate for you actually. Right?
yeah,
So sometimes they hire a new person and they see no output, but they don't see the work that you're actually doing. And nobody's going to know the work you're doing until you talk about it. I've learned that a lot over the years, that sometimes I'm drowning in work and I'm like, of course they know I'm doing this. And they've assigned this again. And they've assigned, they don't know. They don't even
hmm,
remember that you're working on this other thing. So sometimes you have to toot your own horn. I've learned that. Um,
mm,
but yeah, the biggest mistake that new BAs make is just not asking questions enough and
yeah,
not visibly enough. Sometimes it's just putting your camera on so you can see you're there. Like I'll give an example. When I joined this
hmm,
project before this, maybe a year or so ago, um, and I don't know who they had before me. That person, she gave me a good handoff, to be honest with you. She told me everything about the project, where they were, what they're doing, what I need to talk about with them, like who are the personalities. She gave me a very thorough handoff. So I really appreciated that. But when I joined the project, apparently she never went on camera. So when I joined, I'm always on camera, and they're like, "Oh, it was just like it was a difference to them." And I'm always smiling because I'm naturally a very bubbly person.
yeah.
Just they were very intrigued because now they get to see a face, they get to, we get to build a better rapport that way. So sometimes it's as simple as just being visible, just showing up to the meetings on time, putting a camera on if you're remote,
Mm.
just being there helps. We had a BA and he got laid off. In the first round of layoff, he got laid off because
Ooh,
sometimes they have to determine who is better to keep, and you don't want to be the bottom of the list. So sometimes, and this is just the nature of having a job, if you want to not have this problem, then you have to be an entrepreneur, right? So this is just, it's the nature of jobs. Everybody has this to deal with. So with him though, he would, like, I haven't seen him for days. Like sometimes I don't know if he's at work. Like the dude just doesn't show up. He's not there because everybody's on their own project, so you're not really seeing. You don't have to see them every day. But when we
yeah.
have like town hall meetings, when we have little departmental meetings, and we have all, you don't see this guy.
Isn't sure.
So we're
Oh,
like, where's this guy? Like we call his name. Where is he? Have anybody seen it? Nobody knows. Nobody knows where the guy is if the guy's even at work, and the things that he delivered was so shoddy. So
oh,
his laid off time, like he was cut. So these are just things that you don't want to happen. Don't take it for granted that they're not saying anything to you, that they're not watching you. Everybody's going to be watching you when you're new. So you really have
yeah.
to make sure within that 60 days, 90-day period, you're knocking it out of the park. You're being sharp. You're learning. You're showing progress. You're showing interest. You're showing up. They can know that there's a new person on the team, you're building rapport. All of these things are very important. Afterwards, not to say you're going to slack off, but you already build this reputation, so you don't have to keep like, it's not going to be forever, right? But you have to do this
Yeah.
the first couple weeks of this job. All right.